John Stuart Mill could say, as late as the 1860s, that he was still almost the only Englishman he knew who had not been brought up as a believer. The Enlightenment ideal of reason was in any case bound by taxonomies and hierarchies, absolute and extended right through earth and time, that the long history of life might be one driven by shifting coalitions of contingency, with chance having at least one hand on the reins, was still a mostly unthinkable idea. The forms of life were set and had never varied. Species have a real existence in nature, and a transition from one to another does not exist, was the way one magus put it decisively. People also believed, using what they called examples ancient and modern, that societies without inherited order were intrinsically weak, unstable, and inclined to dissolve into anarchy or tyranny. And the example of the Terror in France, which had only very recently congealed into Napoleon's empire, was a strong case. Democracy, in the sense we mean it now, was a fringe ideal of a handful of radicals. Even in America, the future of democracy was unclear, in part because of the persistence of slavery, which was still a feature of Western life. Although many people knew it to be wrong, others thought it acceptable or tolerable, and a handful even thought it benevolent, in that it brought blacks towards Christianity. Democracy was hard to tell from mob rule and the tyranny of mob rule. Democracy existed and was armed, but didn't feel entirely liberal. The difference between reformist parliamentary government and true democracy seemed disturbingly large, even to well-intentioned people. In the 1830s, Tocqueville, sympathetic to American democracy, was still skeptical about its chances, writing that, "Until men have changed their nature and been completely transformed, I shall refuse to believe in the duration of a government which is called upon to hold together 40 different nations, covering an area half that of Europe, to avoid all rivalry, ambition, and struggles between them, and to unite all their independent wills in the accomplishment of common designs." Throughout Europe and America, many thoughtful, truth-seeking people also believed in divine judgment and an afterlife in more or less literal terms. The thought of no time is monolithic, and the people of 1809 in England and America did not believe these things absolutely. The new science of geology was pressing back the history of the earth. Old bones would start turning up the threatened old stories. The new textual studies of the Bible were pressing against an easy acceptance of their truth, too. And there were many utopian radical Democrats in both countries. We can find plenty of radical ideas in that day, just as we will find traces of the astonishing ideas of the next century somewhere on the fringes of our own time. But, on the whole, these ideas belong to the world of what would have been called fancy, not fact. By the time Abraham Lincoln and Charles Darwin were dead, the American murdered by a pro-slavery terrorist in 1865, the Englishman after a long illness in 1882, the shape of history had changed, and the lives they had led and the things they had said had done a lot to change it. 2 small splashes had helped to change the tide of time. Very different beliefs, ones that we now treat as natural and recognize as just part of the background hum of our time, were in place. The world was understood to be very, very old, and the animals and plants in it were known to have changed dramatically over the eons. And though just how they had changed was still debated, the best guesses, then as now, involved slow alteration through a competition for resources over a very long time. People were convinced, on the whole, that democratic government, arrived at by reform or revolution, was a plausible and strong way to organize a modern nation, that republican regimes were fighters and survivors. A giant statue, one of the largest since antiquity, of a goddess of liberty was under construction in once again Republican France for a vindicated Republican America, just to commemorate this belief. Slavery in the Western world was, for the first time in thousands of years, finished, although racism wasn't. Liberal republicanism and universalist democracy had begun the steady merger that persists to this day, so that most of us no longer see the governing systems of Canada and the United States as decisively